Howdy. Welcome to another evening show. Unless you're catching this after the fact and it's no longer evening for you, but that's when I'm doing this anyway. So I am going to be catching up with some Darth Dawkins content that I kind of missed. I hadn't checked these ones out before. I'd heard little bits and pieces of them. I don't know how interesting this is going to be, so I'm going to apologize in advance. This could get a little dull. But I'm hoping that there's something interesting in here, and I have a few resources and stuff that I posted in the description for this video, and I think I'm going to get into like a quick introduction to them because I've mentioned them before in passing, just sort of as a run by. I brought them up once with Jay Robin in a discussion with him, and he flipped out on me. But I figured I'd share them in a video and leave links so that people who might be interested in them can kind of dig into them, take a look at them. So yeah, this one's going to be pretty straightforward. I'm going to be looking at this video. These are both from Capturing Debates channel. I think this first one I'm going to be looking at is from 4 or 5 days ago or so, and then the other one's from a couple days back. Not sure how much more I can contribute to this because it from what I could hear, I was kind of as I was setting up a video, I had listened to these ones kind of on fast forward, and it didn't seem all that. It's pretty well worn territory for Dorothy Pooh. So we'll see what's going on. I guess in the meantime, to officially kick this off, I will play the intro and we will get going. Bossa Nova. Cheesy yet sinister. Anyway, so we're gonna be getting back into this Darth Dawkins shenanigans stuff, and then we'll well, like I said, there's not too much I think that he's doing anything differently here. But we'll be evaluating. I don't know who the Stephen guy is. As you can see, he's gonna be the first one. I'm gonna shrink myself down here so I can play this one. And I've sped these ones up just a little bit to kind of get through it. But I think this first one, it's Darth and Tone Loc, Antonio Fletcher. I call him tone deaf because he is the guy that is just obsessed with the anti-abortion movement. It's the two of them kind of talking to Stephen, and it starts off kind of at the tail end of another thing. I think Darth is screeching about how on a previous conversation went. So we'll start with this one, see where we get, and then the next one is I'm going to apologize. The next one's with Mark, and I think it starts with something about like young Earth creationism. They might get into like a little bit of evolution. If they do, I don't really have too much to say about that because I think that Christians that still do this try to have arguments about young Earth creationism. I mean, that shit is dead. I'm not a biologist. I'm not in the physical sciences, and I'm unfortunately not well versed enough to really argue that. I'm really kind of surprised how many Christians do. So I'm not really interested in it because, as far as I'm concerned, it's a settled issue. But what do I know? So I'm going to say hi to everybody here. Secular Pagan Bum, you were first. Congratulations. Thanks for showing up. Michael Deaton, West 501, AJ, Michael Deaton again, Casey Randy, good to see you. Jody Wheeler, always good to see you, and Bill Pesto. And I don't know if I can read your name. Lene 2? That's an interesting question. One question I wish I could get an answer for would be, is God your ultimate standard, or is God being your ultimate standard? Your ultimate standard? Yeah, I guess both in a way, right? Like, because God is their ultimate standard for morality, but God is also the ultimate standard by which everything is based on. So it's one of those things where it's like, well, saying God, if you kind of subscribe to the type of worldview that Darth Dawkins is saying is necessary, saying that God's necessary for morality is sort of a no-brainer, since God is absolutely necessary for absolutely everything else. So anyway, here we go. A Joe Biden moment, always those cheap shots. Give the guy a break. He's your senior, Darth. I mean, he's at least 80 years old or 78 years old or 75, whatever, however old he is. But he's older than you, Darth, and you need to show him some respect. He's got 15 to 20 years mileage on him, more than you. So, stop being such a young, snot-nosed punk. Is there no audio? We can't hear Jefferson. That's weird. All right, can you guys hear me? Okay, Justin saying only hear you talking. Okay, something went wrong with the screen share, and I think I know exactly what it is. So, stop it, share it. I had this problem once before. I had shared the system audio, but I was trying to share the window so I could flip back and forth between it, but for some reason, that doesn't always work. So, I have to share it one tab at a time. This should get it going. Okay, yep, just one tab. All right, let me reverse this a little bit. All right, here we go. Do over, folks. Sorry.
Well, are these eternal? Were you here yesterday when I was talking with Strong Atheist again? And he kept on trying to advance that the first law.
Is it coming through now? I'm almost certain it is. Usually that tab thing usually clears it up. We can hear him now. Okay, yeah. And I'm sorry that you can hear him now. But here we go. It's kind of necessary for me to rant about him. So
Thermodynamics means that matter, energy, and laws of nature are eternal. Were you here?
Yeah, you were talking to him in my room. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You'll have to forgive me. There's been a lot going on in the past couple of days for me.
No problem.
Yeah. Well, it was your room. See, I had a Joe Biden moment. And you see, I meticulously went through it.
See, now me talking about him respecting Joe Biden makes sense now, right? Maybe? No, still probably a bad joke. Anyway.
With him
dead
multiple times. And after going through it 5 times, he still was recalcitrant. He still was in denial. Okay?
Recalcitrant and in denial. Oof.
Saying it can't be created or destroyed is not a stipulation of eternality. Okay? I explained to him how the first law in second thermodynamics is based upon an extrapolation from induction. No, see, he's just another example that he's going to...
Bear in mind, whatever Darth is ranting about here is based on the previous conversation. The Steven guy that he's about to talk with, the one with Zoidberg as an avatar photo, they haven't even started chat yet. So, yeah, Darth's already priming the pump, his own pump of wrathy rage, to take it out on Zoidberg down there.
To be dishonest. Okay, I said, show me one website, show me one scientific textbook, and just any scientist.
I remember that he couldn't do it.
Show me one scientist, show me one source anywhere that says that the first law of thermodynamics is indicative that these things are eternal. So the first law of thermodynamics is system specific. Okay, they talk about a system. Okay.
Hello, guys. How are we doing today?
Hello. Okay. So do you still believe there is no God?
Currently, yes.
Okay. God does.
Just checking in. Are you still not convinced of the existence of my God? Yeah, still not convinced. Well, it's your fault. Here we go. God does not exist because?
Not exist because.
The question is misformed.
Okay, I like where Steven's going with this so far. Why is the question misformed?
Really? Are we gonna play this stupidity again?
I think this is interesting. There is an honest way to answer this, and it's what my resources in the description are about. You can actually just say, well, God does not exist because the God as you stipulate as an ultimate being can't exist. And you can lay out the argument from Stephen Mason. Now, the argument that's there from Stephen Mason is not exactly, and I'll probably get into it a little bit and try to give a quick rundown of how I found it and why I think it's kind of interesting. I'd like to discuss it with somebody who's a little bit better at philosophy than I am, which there are plenty. There's lots more people out there. and kind of work through it, because I don't think it's definitely not mainstream. I don't hear a lot of people bringing it up. I don't hear a lot of people talking about it. It's generally sort of assumed when guys like Darth Dawkins and Jay Robin talk about like this ultimate thing, for the sake of these discussions, people just sort of assume, oh, okay, well maybe there's something like that exists, right? Or the conversation ends up getting mired with somebody just saying like, what the hell do you mean by an ultimate, right? And that's where things fall. I wasn't sure where Stephen was going to go when he thinks that the question is malformed. I think the question is malformed because it assumes it doesn't make clear what it is it's looking for from the person being asked, right? Like it sounds like it's colloquial enough, God doesn't exist, because sounds like it might be appealing to why you think God doesn't exist, right? It can go either way. It's too vague. Right. And without that, and for Darth or Jay Robin or any of these clowns to get so worked up when somebody quote unquote answers the question wrong, right, gets it wrong, or embraces the stupidity, that seems stupid to me, right? That's just them flailing about, right? Like if they were honest about it, they just ask a different question, like can you give me an explanation as for why, an explanation or an argument as to why you think that God isn't actually real, why he couldn't actually exist. Right. That'd be closer to what I think they want here, right? And my guess is, and to be fair, I did listen to this on fast forward. But my guess is, and I wouldn't even have to have seen this, these guys are going to start bouncing back and forth between ontology and epistemology, like Darth usually does with people he talks to. So,
well, I did come up here to talk about the title. So
how is the question misformed?
It assumes that a God must exist.
No. Your position is that God does not exist.
That's my belief state, yeah.
Right. And what is the rationale behind that belief?
Personal experience.
That's good enough, right? Now, Darth is actually, he's shifted. What's your rationale for that belief? And he said, personal experience. Good enough. What's Darth going to do next?
Okay, that's a non-informative answer.
No, yes. What?
The rationale.
Yeah. Tell me personal experience. Okay, if you said to me, do you believe in God? Yes. What's the rationale behind it? How is it that God exists? Well, personal experience. Is that informative to you?
No, but
those are two different questions, Darth. Two completely different questions. What's the rationale behind his belief for why a God doesn't exist? His personal experience, right? He's not saying that his belief means that God doesn't exist. And that's what Darth is going to try to twist this into, as usual.
But it tells me you have some reasoning we can get into.
Then neither is your answer.
I did say yes.
What? What?
Okay, so God does not exist because?
Well, again, the question assumes God's existence, but I don't believe
Hey,
it exists.
Sir.
Right. Okay. So that's where the question assumes God's existence, but Stephen doesn't believe it. So, all right, it's not a bad place it's not a bad place to start to kind of tweak Darth Dawkins. Like, this is a pretty good technique to use, and I don't know if this is what Stephen's intention is, but it's a pretty good way to get Darth's blood pressure up. By the way, welcome ElfK91, good to see you, and AJ. I said I have some new stuff to undercut tag, which of course undercuts precept. I'd be interested to hear about that. So that sounds neat.
Sir.
Sir, I love how he's doing that. Like, he says "sir" like he's trying to flag somebody down in the aisle. Like he works at the store. Sir, somebody at the register. That's for 12 items or less, sir.
Asking you for a rationale of your position. Tom, remember what I just said to you minutes ago? How the atheists and unbelievers will resort to deception and deceit and dishonesty in varying degrees. Okay.
He hasn't been dishonest. Like, this is the problem. This is the central problem with this God does not exist because question. Like, these guys can then they throw it out there. It's kind of vague. They never get the answer back even if you give them an answer that is directly on point. If you and I wish I actually had a recording of the exchange I had with Jay Robin, but I was in the car when I attempted to throw this out. But even if you give them a direct one, they'll still deny it, right? Because then they'll go, if you throw out an argument from a philosopher that kind of shows, like, say you want to approach like God does not exist because an ultimate is an inconsistent being or a contradictory entity, right? According to this art, what usually happens if you attempt to lay that out. Well, do you believe that? right? Like they want to know if you've got an argument for something that proves whether this thing ontologically, it exists in actuality or it does not exist in actuality, right? And if you present your ideas, if you take the question the wrong way, or if you take it the way you think that they might be asking it, which a lot of people do, like, you mean, what are my reasons for not believing? I think it's a story. Comparative religions. I'm just not convinced. Natural explanations provide better explanations for a lot of these phenomenon, and not, than how they're described in the Bible. So I lost confidence in explanations that the Bible can provide, and therefore I'm not convinced that, if the claims about the natural world they get wrong, they might be getting claims about the existence of a deity wrong. Any of this stuff would inform a person's belief. Now, it doesn't necessarily, all those things could be wrong, right? It could be the case that a God still exists, but those are the reasons for that person's, right? And then when Stephen just brings up personal experience, that can include things like that. Issues with the problem of evil, issues with, trusting in scripture, credibility, all that kind of stuff, all that can count. Stephen kept it wide open for that. But what's Darth flipping out about? Well, you're not giving me an answer to my question. Well, he's giving you a answer to a question that you asked, but it's so poorly worded and so easy to misunderstand. And Darth's got to understand this by now. I've done enough videos on this. I think other people have pointed this out to him, that he's just doing this because I don't know what this is. This is, I think he thinks he's some kind of guru, and when somebody gives him the magic answer that is playing inside his head, that person is the one. They have snatched the pebble from his hand. They get to ascend.
You're seeing it on full display here.
Do you realize, Stephen, no serious philosopher will take how you're answering this question seriously?
Gerstreams, Jefferson's Batchcock, repent. Simple answer, no. Tone says no serious philosopher. Now that's interesting. No serious philosopher would take the answer that you're giving seriously. I'm pretty sure these guys are probably going to say at some point that even the PhDs answer questions as badly as Stephen in their mind. They're going to do that, right? Because Alex Malpass has answered this question when he thinks that what's being asked is the rationale for his belief. He's answered it the same way. Personal experience, or my belief is that these gods are just, God is just a story. That's the rationale behind my disbelief, or my belief that there is no God. If you want an argument for why God can exist or doesn't exist, that's different. Malpass has told him this. It made no difference. I say this every time I do a Darth Dawkins video, and it's weird that I mention it every time. Darth had a lot of conversations with Alex Malpass. I think at least half a dozen. And those are the ones I think that were recorded. So I don't know how many he had on Discord that, just kind of casually happened.
He asked you a legitimate question. If you have a belief, either you have a rationale for it or you don't. He didn't ask an illegitimate question. You know damn well he didn't ask.
Legitimate.
No, you said his question was malformed.
Because it assumes
Nothing malformed it.
No, not
And
dude.
and why is it? If I'm predicating on virtue of the God worldview, why is that a problem?
Well, it's not a problem, but asking someone who doesn't predicate based on that.
Okay, stop right there.
Problem.
Stop right there. But you just said it was a malformed question.
Under my word,
What he just said was a malformed question. He didn't say it. He didn't ask a question. He's giving an answer.
it is. Under yours, it's not.
Okay, good. Then explain to me your worldview.
Okay, so now you want to know a worldview. Well, how was it malformed to begin with? He's saying that you're basically providing something up front. You're smuggling in something from your worldview, assuming the existence of a God, and then asking somebody without that worldview to explain why an aspect of your worldview can't be. Like, you need to prove the God that I assume to be wrong. Why? Why does Stephen need to do that? That's not in his worldview, right? You're just doing like an external critique of each other's worldviews. And now Darth's finally asking Stephen, okay, what is your worldview? But it almost seemed like he was going to attack him like, no, wrong, that was a malformed question, even though it was a statement from Stephen. I was like, I was wondering if Darth was going to get honest there and just and say the quiet part loud for once. There are no other worldviews according to Darth Dawkins. There's only one worldview, the one where God exists. Darth's worldview is the only one that can exist because he's a psycho. Well, if it's not a question, then it is a malformed question. Checkmate. Yeah, you got me. You got me, Jack.
Okay, am I not asking you to unpack and explain your worldview?
No, you are. I'm just being clear.
Good. Okay, God does not exist because.
Well, under my worldview, there's no evidence for him.
Okay, now, when you say there's no evidence for God, the word evidence refers that there is a causal relation between A and B. Okay, so the pistol on the kitchen floor either is or is not evidence for the dead body on the floor. Okay, now, if you and I are homicide detectives and we come in, there's a dead body on the floor with a bullet hole and there's a pistol on the floor.
Well, the dead body is evidence of the dead body on the floor. The pistol's not evidence of the dead body on the floor. The pistol might be evidence of the means to make the person dead on the floor, right? Sorry, now I'm just getting nitpicky.
And I come in and I say to you as my partner detective, I say, that gun is not evidence of a homicide. What are you going to say to me?
It could have been suicide. You've got a point.
I didn't ask you what it could have been. What would naturally a partner say? You both walk in at the same time. You walk in together. You see the dead body on the floor and you see the gun on the floor and you see there's a bullet hole in the head. Okay. And I turn to you and I say, that gun is not evidence of a homicide. Now,
You would be technically correct.
Okay. Now, really?
Yeah. He died by the gun,
Okay.
most likely,
No.
but just the gun and the
No,
bullet doesn't mean
Yeah, you're
someone
not
else killed him.
You're not getting it. When I say there's not evidence for it, I can mean that there is not ontologically a causal connection and a dependency relationship between the two states of affairs.
The only thing that the gun might be is that, like, if the person on the floor, if you got a dead body, they got a bullet in their head, and there's a pistol on the floor, it isn't evidence necessarily of a homicide because it almost could be evidence of a suicide. So Darth would make a shitty detective. I mean, granted, he's obviously playing a shitty detective, playing it up like, oh, that gun has nothing. Like, I think he's trying to appeal to some kind of common sense. Like, well, what if I told you that gun has nothing to do with the crime here? You don't know that there was actually a crime there. What if that person just ended their own life with a gun? Right. Pistols on the floor and there's a knife in the body. Right.
Or it could mean that we are in a state of ignorance as to whether or not there is causal relations between the gun. Okay. So when you say there's not evidence, okay, you're either talking about there is not any causal relationship ontologically, or you're just making a statement of saying, well, I have no knowledge of a relationship.
I would probably go with more of the second one on the God claim.
Okay,
Yeah.
So what you're saying is that when you conceptualize facts and invoke them, you are invoking them as standalone without respect to them necessitating deriving from God.
Yeah. Epistemologically, you kind of have to. Again, this is a relationship between human thought and the apprehension of, just the sort of apprehension of facts and an ontological reality grounding the things that are represented by those facts that Darth doesn't do a good job of, like, sussing out. I mean, this is always problematic for him, and this is him already with Stephen trying to. I mean, he's already been doing it with his question, but this constant smashing, taking ontology and epistemology and smashing them into two. Like, you can't know it. All Darth's doing is saying, Stephen, you can't know anything unless it's actually real. And now you need to show me how it's actually real. You can't know that you're an atheist because you have to show conclusively that there isn't a God, that there can't be one. And if you can't do that, then you can't believe that. And that doesn't make any sense. Because, and Darth has said this, he's quoted Kai Nielsen all the time, all the arguments for God may fail, but that doesn't mean that God doesn't actually exist, right? So if all Darth has is arguments, those aren't good enough. What Darth thinks he has is some kind of rhetorically perfect circle that assumes God as an inevitable necessity, right? It has to be that way. It's something that we have to take for granted as just like we take our subjective experience for granted. But he doesn't demonstrate how. He just insists that that's the case. And then when somebody asks, like, well, wait a minute, how is it the case that, why should I assume the existence of your God in the same way that I have to assume my own subjective experience? Because after all, if I deny my subjective experience, I affirm my subjective experience. Well, Darth will just try to bring up skepticism. Do you really know what you're thinking? Are you really even there? He'll try to put that person in a position of into radical skepticism, which does you no good, because if you get to that point and you have to embrace radical skepticism about your own existence, and you can doubt, you can affirm your non-existence, even though you're kind of affirming your existence when you do that. Let's say that there is no problem with that under Darth's lights. Then you can be skeptical about that God too, and you don't require him for grounding of facts.
Okay. Good. Now, do you understand? And you probably don't.
Exactly, Jody Wheeler. Because the other way that cuts is, all the arguments for a not God world may fail, but that does not mean the not God world isn't true. So I'm still waiting to hear the recording of somebody delivering that to Darth. Really want to hear that.
But you should by now. That is a de facto indirect denial of God.
Yes.
When you say
I actually agree with you there. I've said my belief is that God does not exist.
Now. So the point is this. So are you saying when there's no evidence for God that the sun, the moon, and the stars and bunny rabbits running across your front lawn do not and cannot stand in causal relations to God as the ultimate cause? Is that what you're saying?
No. See, that's weird, right? So the atheist the skeptic has to show that a thing like a rabbit and the stars and the trees and the sky, all of reality, can't stand in causal relation to God in order to really affirm their belief system that there is no God. But if you ask a Christian, how do you infer from the existence of a rabbit the existence of God? Tom Rabbit did this with Veckel. Okay, how do you flower, yada yada yada, therefore God? What's in between? What's the yada yada yada? How'd you get from flower to God? They can't do it.
Not at the moment in my belief state cannot be a stronger
sir,
term.
I'm talking about ontologically outside of your mind. Okay.
Well, I can't go outside.
You're changing you're changing. Okay. So then you're not. So then you're saying God doesn't exist because I'm unaware.
My belief.
No, he's not saying that, because he's talking about his beliefs, Darth. What's Darth doing these days? I don't know. Not a whole lot. I mean, this was from, 15th of May when somebody recorded this, and this was, Tone's 128th day on talking about abortions. So, yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen too many recordings of him lately. I'm not sure what he's been up to.
Belief state is that he doesn't exist because I'm unaware of him.
Okay. Yeah. So God can only exist if and only if you had a belief in him?
No. If I had a belief in him, I would believe.
Okay, boom, you now contradicted yourself. Okay? You just did a concrete facial, right? Just right there.
How did he do that?
Now, you've now admitted that if you had an absence of belief or were in a state of ignorance about the existence of God, that it doesn't mean that God doesn't exist. So you've now contradicted.
No, he didn't, because he's been able to keep the difference between what he believes and what actually is separate. Darth hasn't. He hasn't contradicted himself. It's interesting that Darth is illustrating this as a contradiction when Darth. Yeah, this is weird. He thinks this is devastating, right? Like, oh yeah, it could be. I could believe something. It could be the case that I'm wrong, right? Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. That lines up with what we understand about epistemology. That lines up with what we understand about what can actually be. But Darth seems to be like, ha, you've revealed a fatal weakness in your worldview, sir. I don't get how. Still don't understand how. He does this all the time. Like he's like, you tripped over your own feet there. Like, no, he didn't.
Yourself. Are you aware of that?
Well, I always said my belief state was that he doesn't exist. I never said he definitely doesn't exist.
Tom, did you notice? Did you notice?
Okay, now Darth's going to get super triggered, right? Now he's going to start steaming. Like, I said I don't believe he exists. I didn't say he actually, he definitely doesn't exist, right? That's kind of where Stephen was going with that. So now Darth's going to appeal to Tone.
What is the complete evasion of my question?
Well, yeah, and not only
Sorry,
that,
I have missed the question.
You're moving from the justification of your position to just saying that you have a mental state.
You guys are changing what position you want him to justify, his beliefs or an argument for the non-existence of your God. You haven't settled on that. So I love this. They're accusing Stephen of being wiggly on this whole thing, and it's like, do you guys know what you're even asking him? When Darth asked him for a rationale for his belief state, his words, what is the rationale for your belief state? Stephen answered personal experience. Darth's response, that's not informative. It is informative. When you're talking about somebody's belief states, that's informative. Them telling you, now it's not detailed, right? If you want details, you'd have to give Stephen a chance to flesh that out. Everybody's personal experiences in terms of forming their belief states is going to be a little bit different, especially given what it is we're talking about one believes. But this from Tone is this is classic tone deaf.
Yeah. You contradicted yourself, and I spelled it out clearly.
No, you didn't.
I must have missed it. Could you go through it again?
Wow. Isn't that amazing, Tom Lock?
This is incredible.
Was I
Tone's right about that. This is incredible.
talking too fast, Tom Lock?
No.
Okay. A supreme being, creator God, can only exist if you happen to have a positive belief that he does exist. Is that what you hold to?
No.
Okay, good. So I asked you, how is it that God does not exist?
No, I think Tone would get confused about the TV mounting procedure, I think. And Darth would probably let his kink fly and be like, what do you mean by mounting a TV? Appealing to Antonio is a fallacy. Agreed. Yeah, I love it. Like, wow, you see that, Tone Log? And the weird thing is, too, like, I don't know if there's a big audience. Like, I don't know when this happened. I wish I knew what time this occurred. But that cheesy appeal to, like, hey, check this idiot out. When nothing's happened, right? Like, I wouldn't even say that this is, like, does this look bad for Stephen? No, it just looks bad for conversation in general.
And you said, well, there's no evidence for God. But then when we unpack that statement is just simply a statement that you are absent a positive belief in God, that facts stand in relation to God.
Well, you missed the first part of my answer.
So it doesn't follow, because you don't have a positive belief in God. It doesn't follow from that God doesn't exist.
No, but it does follow from my
good. So God ontologically does not exist because
there's
there it is. God doesn't exist. Why doesn't God actually exist? Why doesn't he exist in reality? Finally. So he's been talking to Stephen for the better part of 10 minutes, and he's finally cleared up what he meant by the question. Even though I would point out again that he got so wrapped up in the back and forth on this thing, he was asking Stephen, what is the justification for how did he put it? What's the justification for your belief state? And Stephen said it was personal experience, and he said that was non-informative. So even Darth loses track of where he's going with this kind of stuff. But now, okay, fine. So now he wants Stephen to provide an argument for why God can't actually exist. Fair enough.
No clear evidence for him within my worldview.
Okay, so you're going to do this again, like a dog returns to its vomit.
Yeah, Stephen actually is being kind of weak there, right? Like, that's more of a justification for why he doesn't believe in it, right? He doesn't see any evidence that connects to the God as being described, right? That's not really a great evidence. That's not, he's even admitted, right? Just because he's not convinced that it's real doesn't mean it actually isn't. So at this point, given that Darth has asked a more specific question, Stephen's not given a great answer now.
Vomit, and this is, wow, a hot lunch. You're going to do this again?
Darth, you were the one that allowed him to go into the belief thing because you didn't clear that up from the jump. You've been talking in circles for 10 minutes. You could have cleared this up with Stephen if you just clarified that God does not exist because means I want from you an argument for why God is an ontological impossibility. That's what Darth wants. He wants someone to present him with an argument for why the God the God as he defines it is not possible. Because it's either necessary, Darth thinks it's necessary, or the opposite is true. It must be impossible. He's big on that Plantinga thing.
After we've already been through this?
Well, you haven't stepped into my worldview and shown me how God must exist within my worldview.
Listen,
You've only started from your worldview.
You remember what I said to you earlier, before anyone got in the room? Of what pathological liars and deceivers they are? They will resort to any Okay, they will resort to any mental gymnastics in order to preserve and sustain their autonomy of reasoning.
I actually think this is a compliment. I'm going to finish playing that out.
At all costs, including being deceptive. Okay, so listen carefully. Okay, we're talking about the ontological status of God.
Okay. Oh, okay. Hang on. The ontological
status. You have a positive attitude toward the proposition God exists.
I agree.
God ontologically does not exist because
within my worldview, there's no evidence for it.
You're not understanding. Okay, but you see, when you say there's no evidence, all you're just simply saying is that you're aware of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think Stephen's moved along with him. Like, I think Darth's now asking a better question. He wants, but this is the central problem. If Darth had simply asked him, like, hey, all Darth has to tell Stephen, like, Stephen, I get that what you're telling me is a justification. You've given me the justification for your belief, and I get that. The problem is Darth doesn't get that. I really don't think he does understand that. But he could be like, okay, yeah, no, I understand that. Like, you've got reasons for justifying the reason you think you believe there is no God. But what do you think if you had to provide an argument to explain why a God is impossible? If you ask Stephen that way, my guess is Stephen would be like, well, I don't have an argument to explain that, because most people, I think, would probably ask Darth, well, how are you defining this God? Darth would then come back with the creator of all things, ultimate foundation of all, that which makes possibility and impossibility, blah, 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 all that crap, right? It's just an ultimate being. And not a very sophisticated one, but that's essentially what he's putting out there. Without an argument against ultimacy, or not a clear understanding of the parameters of whatever Darth's talking about, a person probably couldn't present an argument to actually suggest why that thing definitively can't exist, right? That would take more. That's a heavier lift than I think most people are going to be able to bear. The only thing that they could do at that point is then. This is one of the reasons why I think actually Bible study is better, right? Because Darth claims that his God has properties A, B, and C. When you read the Bible, Old Testament and New, you see within the narratives of some of these stories descriptions of God and actions of God and statements from God, both as Yahweh and as Jesus, that subtly and sometimes not so subtly chip away at those properties and those characterizations. So, and even if they're not statements, they could be even descriptions about God, of what God did and how he reacted.
Okay, so you are not saying, you correct me, you are not saying that all the facts you are aware of exist ontologically with metaphysical independence of God, that they do not ultimately derive and depend upon God for their existence. You're not saying that, then, right?
There's been too many negatives there. I'm losing the thread.
Okay. Is it your position that any facts at all simply exist ultimately for some other reason other than ultimately deriving from God? Is that your position?
What? That doesn't really make any sense. Yeah, Hogtie. There it is. Even before anyone comes into the room, DD has to remind Tone Deaf to hate non-believers. Yeah, as if Tone needs any more encouragement in that area.
Yes.
Okay. How did you determine that?
Because the facts I'm acquainted with do not reference God.
Yeah, you're just restating the same thing.
That doesn't tell us how you determine it.
That's simply a
I don't know about that. Oh, Tone's starting to giggle.
The same claim.
I mean, do you want me to
or chuckle or huff or whatever that thing he does? He calls laughter. Jefferson, if Stephen believes that God does not exist, then it follows that Stephen doesn't hold to the position that a God is necessary for anything. So what demonstration does Darth want? Yeah, and from his worldview, yeah, I mean, it's pretty. That's not bad, because I think what Stephen, if Stephen's like, well, look, I haven't seen any evidence that demonstrates this God, so it sort of goes without saying that evidence, actually, I think moving down that rail is probably where I think guys like Darth Dawkins and Tone Deaf and others are going to get ticked off, because the one thing they don't want to realize is that they are still using their cognitive faculties to conclude these things or infer these things or otherwise. The assumption they're making, like, okay, you, Mr. Irrational Skeptic, you don't believe in God. Why can't he exist? And Stephen's saying, okay, well, it seems to me that now he's starting to get into a little bit more ontological territory, because before it sounded like he was just kind of appealing to justifying his beliefs. But now he's basically saying, okay, well, if you have empirical measurements about the world and any evidence that we can gather about these things doesn't line up with the existence of the God you're talking about, So, right, the evidence doesn't match, right? Nothing. Not only is there anything that's that points to God, but we even have evidence that seems to point away from the God that you're describing. So, yeah, that would be, that could be evidence for the toward an argument that God does not ontologically exist. I don't think that's all that conclusive, but it's not bad, right? And as far as like being evidence to support an argument for the non-existence of a God, it's not going to be a knockdown, drag-out one. I don't think it's going to be strong, but it is the start of one, and it's definitely not irrational. So I'm sure Darth would say otherwise.
You go through where I think thoughts come from and how they relate to reality.
Do you understand? See, Tom, did you hear what he's just doing here? Didn't I not tell you that they purposely will engage in mental gymnastics? Okay,
he's doing
when answering truthfully will show the bankruptcy of their position. Okay, now, how did you determine that facts exist without metaphysical necessity of ultimately deriving and depending upon God? How did you determine that?
Well, because I can demonstrate at least 1 to 2 facts that do not and cannot derive from God.
Well, we've been waiting for you to do it, and you haven't done so.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Well, I don't know that Stephen actually had a good moment to actually do that. So tone deaf is being, as usual, tone deaf. And like, we've been waiting for you to do that. Like, well, Stephen really didn't have an opportunity. Like, it's not like he's been given an opportunity to just sort of like rip out an extended explanation about stuff. Darth's cutting him off at relatively short responses.
Go ahead.
All right, reality exists, and I exist within reality.
Okay, really. Okay, how old are you?
30.
Dude, that's an assertion, not a demonstration.
This is the listen.
Do you have
for those of you Tom Rabbit fans out there? Listen, for those of you Tom Rabbit fans out there who like to get on your keyboard and defecate on me in the comment section, sir.
What?
That was an incredibly stupid thing you just said.
Defecate on you? Well, nowadays Darth just hangs out and he just lurks in Clubhouse. Maybe he's still lurking around in some Discord channels, but yeah. And if Darth is hanging out in some of his buddy J Robin's rooms, J Robin is playing like, black hat sheriff in there, like somebody shows up in his town and they can give him the, look at him crossways. He calls him out and guns him down in the middle of the street. Right? That's how he runs his shows. There'll be no defecating on Darth in my channel. Get on your keyboards and defecate. Cool.
Okay. Reality exists, okay, by itself. And then here's the issue, okay? When you say reality exists by itself, okay, with independence from God, you're just
not by itself, just that it does exist.
Okay. Reality is an abstraction attempting to mentally unify the set of all real particulars. Okay?
Yeah.
So when you say that the set of all real things exist, okay, you're saying, well, they exist. How does the fact that they exist translate, okay, and justify that they exist without metaphysically and ultimately deriving from God? How does that follow?
Well, because God's nowhere in the equation of them existing.
You're simply restating the same claim without defending it. Do you realize what you're doing?
Well, can you point to me where God existing is required for reality?
Do you realize? Okay, see, notice again the constant resort to.
Now he's starting to take deeper breaths. Yeah, Stephen. No, that's a decent question. Can you show me why God's necessary for reality and for existence? Can Darth show that? No. Darth, this is why he has to conflate, epistemology with ontology, because he has a rhetorical argument that he thinks makes the ontology, if he can come up with something that is so rhetorically tightly knit, right, and so like a valid argument, right, like the inference rule's there, it's valid, therefore it's sound, therefore it's actually real, it's actually true, like. I don't know what happened to Darth, but I think like when apologists tried to flip philosophy around and weaponize it against atheists, he took that shit seriously, like a little too seriously. And I think he does really treat it like it's some kind of like, no, this is, if you say it in this way because God makes logic thus and so, if it follows the inference rule, then it's thus and so. Like, no, it doesn't mean it's actually real. It's just like Those are tools for helping us reason through things and check for inconsistencies in our reasoning. They're not, again, I keep having to use this, they're not magic spells. They're not incantations.
Yeah, he's shifting the burden of proof. He's not actually defending his claim.
You see, this is what I told.
His claims, he defended his claim before and you guys ignored it. He defended his justification for his belief by citing his personal experience, and Darth blew him off and said it was non-informative. Tone Deaf obviously didn't run to his defense. Now they're getting into the ontological thing, which I'm pleased that Darth is asking that question. Tell me why God does not ontologically exist, because, right? I still think that that's a clumsy way of saying it, right? What he needs to tell somebody is, I want you to give me an argument for why God is impossible. That's all Darth has to do. Darth, if you're listening, that's what you need to tell people. Please provide me an argument for why God is impossible, right? And then be prepared for that person to say, what God are you talking about? What are the properties of the God we're talking about again? And then try to be patient. Take deep breaths through your nose, out your mouth, maybe mute your mic when you do that. Calm down, count to 10 and 20, and then provide them the parameters of the God that you're dealing with, and then see if they can provide you an answer or some kind of argument that would, might lead to that. Darth had saved himself a shitload of time. And then if they don't provide him one, then we can get straight to the point. When Darth says, aha, you can't provide me with an answer for why God doesn't exist, it's okay for me to assume that he does. And then everybody can be like, haha, joke's on you, fallacy boy.
Old timeline, okay? And I appreciate you coming up to the stage, okay? But what you are doing is you are engaging in deceit and deception and mental gymnastics in order to come to the admittance that your position is completely bankrupt, even on its own terms, okay? So asking
me, there may be mental gymnastics here, but I'm trying to be honest.
Listen.
Yeah, and he's already starting to get wound up. Hogtie makes a great point. Watch this. In a conversation with DD, exactly one person will get emotional and angry. If this guy stays calm, which he has so far, we're less than 1 minute from DD rage spitting. Yep, and I think you're right. If there was a way I could distribute, like Coca-Cola for people that, although I'd probably run out of distributing Coke. I mean, because at this point, I think everybody kind of knows. Darth is as predictable as an NPC.
No, you're not. You are not. In my biased opinion, you're not. You're not being honest at all. Okay.
Okay. In your opinion, he's not being honest. Could you be wrong about that, Darth? Maybe he's just wrong. Maybe you guys are misunderstanding each other. Is it acceptable? I think this is fascinating because Darth is Captain Christianity, right? I think it's fascinating for him. Like, is it okay to assume malice when just incompetence could be at play? Is that okay? Is that Christ-like? Right? Now, for Darth, somebody who noticeably gets his dopamine kicks from punishing people or seeing people punished or vicariously, living through that, or yelling at people and poning them and showing that they're wrong. Clearly, any opportunity to jump from a person demonstrating incompetence or making a mistake to that person's lying to me, or they're trying to trick me, or they're being mean to a friend, right? Like, that has nothing to do with it, but it gives Darth cover to then rage spit at him and then get his dopamine kicks, because now he's no longer just a Christian trying to minister. He's an avenging angel for Christ, and he's going to smite these smite-worthy heathens.
Now, all you have simply done when I've asked you to justify how it is that one or more facts, okay, exist with metaphysical independence from God, in other words, that they don't necessitate ultimately deriving and depending upon God, you just simply restate the same claim in different words. That's all you've done so far. I'll say, how did you determine that all the facts that you're acquainted with exist metaphysically, non-dependently, non-derivationally from God? You say, well, reality exists.
Well, I'm saying reality existing is a fact that doesn't require God.
How did you determine that?
Because reality is here and God isn't clearly a part of reality.
Okay, so no. So are you just simply saying that you're aware of?
Yes.
Okay, so now, again, we're going back to your original claim. God can only exist if and only if that you have a mental acceptance that he exists.
No.
That's a no.
Well, actually, no, that awareness part of it should be the thing, right? Because God has revealed himself to everybody, right? I think it's funny how quickly Darth kind of forgets a lot of these properties. Like, if natural revelation is enough for us, if that's supposed to be enough, right? All of us know that there's a God because we live in a creation. All right, but that's not really enough, right? Because from natural creation, you can assume you can reach conclusions about all sorts of stuff. The polytheistic gods and gods of the sky and spirits of rocks or spirits and all this other kind of stuff. Or your ancestors watch over you in the afterlife, whatever. There's all sorts of different things that you could just conclude from the natural world around you. You wouldn't necessarily infer God from just quote unquote the Christian capital general revelation thing. And what he's trying to do here, I think, is muddy the waters a bit with Stephen, and it's like Darth is able to hang on to this idea, like, just because you're not aware of God, or just because you don't believe in God, doesn't follow from that lack of belief or your disbelief that God isn't actually real. That's true. However, an argument has been presented to Darth that, given the properties of the God that he tends to lay out, the fact that I don't know, or the fact, in this case, the fact that Stephen is not aware of Darth's God, right? He doesn't believe it. He's not convinced of it, is evidence that Darth's specific God isn't real, because Darth's God necessarily reveals itself to all. And the only way Darth can really get out of that is to start wrestling with like different theological definitions and try to, kind of special plead out of that. Before I jump back in here, thank you very much for the super chat, AJ, for the Buy the World a Coke fund. Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to need to start saving up now. And thank you, Jody, for the super chat, also for the Buy the World a Coke fund. Appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Let me finish, Tom.
Yeah.
That's a complete non sequitur. That a God can only exist, a supreme being and creator God can only exist if and only if you have a positive attitude toward the proposition that God exists.
Well, a God that necessarily reveals itself to its creation, yeah, that one would, right? Another kind of God that hides in the shadows and doesn't necessarily reveal itself to its creation, that God could exist. But Darth doesn't want to talk about that kind of God. That's not the biblical God.
It's your position, which you just stated. Do you realize that?
I disagree that that's my position.
Okay, goodbye. Okay, that's okay.
Right, can we talk about that?
That's such a random moment to kick him.
Okay.
It's talking to him.
Can you believe the deceit there?
Okay, so now cue the justification for kicking him. Like, it makes no sense why he has to. Well, I mean, it does kind of make sense because that was really random. Like, he just lost patience and kind of like, I don't know if he had like a little bit of an anxiety thrill or something, like, get rid of him. And now cue the cope. You're right. He's just going to have to turn to tone deaf to soothe his shattered nerves.
Yeah, it's really pointless talking to him. He's not going to answer the question.
Maybe he's an illegitimate love child of Jeff Trimble.
What does that have to do with anything? I mean, leave Jeff alone. Leave Jeff's alone.
I recently blocked Jeff too because he's a troll as well.
Tone blocked Jeff? I can see that. I think Jeff was gunning for tone deaf pretty hard.
Oh, worse than that.
Like, I had pinned Jeff against the wall the other day, and he.
You did what, tone deaf? You did what?
Oh, worse than that.
Like, I had pinned Jeff against the wall the other day, and he literally avoided answering my question.
Well, maybe he was shocked because you were pinning him against a wall. Right, tone deaf? I mean, calm down.
And then I kicked him out. He just basically said, I don't care. I'm not going to address what you're saying. And I booed him out. And then he sends me these ridiculous messages talking about I'm afraid of him and I'm a coward. And then I'm like, you know what, man? You're a troll. And then I immediately
Carnage, come up. I will explain to you why. Okay, come on up. No, you come up right now, and I will explain it to you. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
You want to post a comment? Okay. Okay. Hit the road. All right, you're gone.
Okay.
Hit the road, Jack. Okay. Why do I overtalk people? I do it much, if not most of the time. When I do it, is because I am discerning that in my mind that they are clearly being evasive and deceptive.
So overtalking should be universally, it should be viewed as a universal negative. But when Darth uses his big brain discernment, he's justified in over-talking people who deserve it. Cool. A law unto himself, that ding-dong.
And after doing this 10 to 12 years, okay, 10 plus years, I've had it with people running the clock out, okay, like Stephen.
Darth, you were on social media platforms for hours at a time. Nobody is running. What clock are they running out? You are 61, so I guess you could say that they're literally running your life clock out, maybe, but you probably got quite a few years. Well, I mean, if he's spending less time on social media, which it seems like he's doing, then maybe his quality of life is improving. So, he's probably got some better years ahead of him. But if he comes right back into this kind of stuff, or if he's hiding out in some place I'm just not aware of, he's on a Discord channel nobody knows about, and he's spending 8 hours a day, vein sticking out of his head. Who knows? Although, I don't know. Bitterness and rage might be a preservative.
Okay. Right. I'll ask him a question, and I'll say, "What's the rationale that's true?" And he just simply restates the position again, just in slightly different words. Well, God doesn't exist, he says, because there's no evidence for God. Oh, does that mean because nothing can stand in causal relations, or that you're just unaware of it? He says, well, he's unaware of it. Oh, so God can exist if and only exist as a supreme being and creator if you have a positive attitude toward the proposition God exists. I mean,
no, he kind of said that wasn't his take. Justin, thank you for the super chat. Does DD shop for vocal expressions at Kmart? Oh, boy, Justin, that's terrible. That's terrible. But thank you for the super chat, and thank you for the dad joke. That's pretty good.
This is the asinine responses that we get. And by the way, we get this same claptrap from atheists who have PhDs. Same thing.
Oh, okay. We get the same claptrap from atheists who have PhDs. But Tone Deaf said at the beginning of this that he told Stephen when Stephen was talking about like what was justifying his belief. He's like, well, Stephen, if some PhD philosopher was in here, they'd be embarrassed at your. I think he said, I don't know if he said embarrassed or whatever. They just wouldn't take your response seriously. Darth is directly contradicting Tone Deaf now. He's saying, we get the same stuff from them too. The same flabby non sequiturs and evasions and deceit and dodging and dipping and ducking and dodging and doinking, whatever he's freaking out about.
Because regardless of their academic achievements, right? At the end of the day, they put their pants on one leg at a time or two legs at a time, and they are trying to preserve and protect at all costs their autonomy of reason. So they will just engage in mental gymnastics.
Mental gymnastics.
And what does Darth Dawkins say? This is what they do.
This is what they do. Jack Burton writes, Jack Burton says, TD is the Steven Seagal of rhetoric. The longer he does it, the worse he gets. Yep. Asinine. He does use the word asinine quite a bit. Excuse me, asinine quite a bit. He uses it quite a bit.
I mean, he kept saying over and over again, talking about his experiences. He just said that multiple times, which doesn't answer the question. And he admitted it didn't answer the question. And it just goes back to the same crap anyway.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's it for that. Let's remove this and share out another one. And I'm going to move into this one. This one I'm also moving at a little bit of a faster speed. I'm going to go through this one. I'm going to play quite a bit of this. Enlighten is actually in this one. This is Darth Dawkins shows up, but it's actually a guy named Truthiness. Enlighten, Jinsar, Mark, and James are in this one. So we'll see. Sorry for the silence, the dead air. Darth Dawkins versus Mark. Regularity of nature. Yeah, I might not have too much to say about this one, so I might get through this one pretty quickly here. Let's see what happens.
By the totality of the evidence and the lack of contrary evidence, right?
Okay, so what
talk about? All right, well,
and this one just sort of, I mean, that was the very beginning of the video. It just sort of drops into it. So yeah. So apparently there's been a discussion going on. I'm not sure exactly where. We'll have to figure out the context as it goes. But Darth has arisen. Descended? Yeah, arisen. He's popped up out of the depths from the Legion of Doom.
everything So, for example, if you were to deny, I didn't want to go down Darwin or evolutionary tracks here, because we're talking about morals, but if you were to deny evolution as it's proposed, say you're young Earth creationist, for example, right?
I'm not a creationist. Just a
okay.
lame. I'm not a creationist. Just a
Uh-oh. Enlighten is not a young Earth creationist.
well, you know.
Not yet.
Oh, but Darth's going to convert him. Ooh. Is Darth admitting to grooming Enlighten? Sorry.
Not yet. Not yet.
But
Well,
things- but-
Darth, are you a creationist? I thought you were not a creationist.
Yes, I am a creationist.
You're a creationist? Okay, my bad.
Some respect lost.
Yeah, but Mark, all of this is irrelevant, man. Like the point is that
that's-
if you're using a method to come to conclusions about the ultimacy of reality, they're provisional, and that's not what we're talking about here.
Yes, I'm saying from my worldview, reality
And what methods could you possibly use to conclude the ultimacy of reality? How do you conclude ultimacy?
exists. Reality is determinable with error, right? I think there's an error in our measurement, but we have a pretty good idea about some things because of the reliability, right?
Do you understand when
And
I
I
say
think that-
reality exists? Like, existence is not a predicate. Okay, Immanuel Kant even addressed this. Okay.
Existence exists. We exist. You know the.
Okay.
I
Listen.
think
I
therefore-
don't mean to be rude. Listen to me. I don't mean to be rude, but that's nonsensical. Listen carefully. I don't think you understood what I said. Right? It took me.
No, John Rapp writes, "G'day, mate. Lurking while working. I'll keep an ear on. Will there be a test? There will be no tests. No pop quizzes either. There might be Coke. The soft drink, not the, whatever. But good to see you.
While to understand it, existence is not a predicate. Okay. Existence is something that we refer to. That there is something that possesses attributes and properties, and it's real. Okay. But to sit there and say existence exists.
That's a tautology.
It's really not sensical. Okay.
Well, I wouldn't say it's nonsensical, but it's a tautology, right? I could agree with that, and it has properties, sure.
No, but listen. Why do you think Immanuel Kant, who we as Christians would disagree on certain points, but nonetheless he was a brilliant philosopher? Why would he make such an elementary blunder by saying existence is not a predicate? No,
I think this is kind of odd, right? Because it's almost like they're saying existence can't be a predicate for existence, right? Which doesn't make sense, right? When Kant said that, Kant made the argument or the claim that existence isn't a predicate. He was talking about as a property for other existing things. This seems like they're trying to talk about existence as not being a predicate for existence itself, which, granted, that wouldn't be. But I don't think that's what Mark was talking about. Mark's talking about like we assume existence in the sense that we're assuming our subjective experience. It's probably not all that Mark has in there, right? Because Mark might be concluding a little bit more because of things that we can test that are empirical or counterintuitive to our subjective experience that prove that an outside world is actually going on. Maybe, but I'm assuming way too much about Mark's position, so we'll see what happens here next.
Doesn't-
Oh, and thank you, Alpha. Money for Coke, the soft drink, not the drug. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks for clarifying. I appreciate the generosity, but I don't know what cocaine prices are going for, so yeah, I'm just going to stick to the soft drink. Thank you, Alpha.
Is this going somewhere? I mean, I'm trying to see where you're going.
to say that existence exists is something, and I'm not trying to be demeaning to you. It's the kind of thing that an adolescent who aspires to learn philosophy would say.
Yeah, well, we're in the
An adolescent learning philosophy. So with him saying that, I'm going to read this. Hogtie Jim. Oh, existence is not a predicate. When did Dede pick up that catchphrase? It's correct, but I bet Dede can't explain this point from first year philosophy. Yeah. No, I again, you'd be right, Hogtie, and if I bet you a Coke, I'd owe you one. So
middle of it, where I was in the middle of a conversation with other people, and I said that
Right.
in response to
Okay, go ahead then.
a comment about scientific, endeavors and how we know things through science, right? So if we want to have a different conversation,
Let me ask
we
you
can
this.
have
Let
that.
me ask you this question: can science defend itself?
Can science itself? It can defend itself through the
No.
products of its
That's false. That's false.
Yeah.
There are a number of things that the scientific method cannot establish. Okay, the scientific method cannot establish the laws of logic. Okay, the scientific method cannot establish identity over time. The scientific method cannot establish the causal principle. Okay, that there's a cause,
Sure, but
cause and effect relationship in events. The scientific method can.
it wouldn't establish it, but it would demonstrate it in action so that we could hypothesize it or theorize it, wouldn't it? Maybe I'm not getting my scientific theory correct, but
not establish the regularity or what we call the uniformity of nature, or that nature operates in some regular ways.
Yeah, those are all phenomena we observe in the universe. That's correct.
No, sir. You cannot observe. You cannot. Well, let's go through these one by one. Okay. You cannot observe identity over time. You infer it.
Okay. You mean that something?
Listen to me. Listen to me carefully. Okay. Have you ever seen TV prank shows where they take identical twins and they replace one with the other, and the person who's being pranked thinks it's the same person? You ever seen anything like that?
Yeah, identity over time. If there was not identity over time, the universe wouldn't work. We wouldn't be able to exist.
No, sir. You're not understanding.
I'm not sure you do.
I always, Jenny, the scientific method uses the laws of logic. This was painful the first time around. I didn't see this one. I think it's weird that he is. When Darth Dawkins gets into a conversation with somebody and he's talking about, identity over time, this is a guy, when asked in a conversation about the ship of Theseus problem, he said there wasn't a problem. And I'm not sure which way he weighs in on the ship of Theseus issue. That's the one where, the ship takes off, it sails, it gets damaged, it gets replaced by new parts by the time it reaches the end of its voyage. Every part on the ship has been replaced. Is it still the same ship, right? I'm not exactly sure which way Darth weighs in on this. I think he said it is. Yep, same exact ship. Right. He just announces that it's like, that's not the point, right? The point is to make you think about identity, right? That's why it's a little bit of a conundrum, right? Darth just gave some an answer like a 6-year-old. Well, sure, yeah, same boat. No, that's not. Forget it.
Well, I've actually studied this. Okay.
Not very well.
What you're not understanding. Okay. Listen, if you're going to be snide, that'll be the end of you. You don't know what you're talking about. Okay. Now, when you say that the universe
Marx being snide
works, you are presupposing the regularity of nature. And when you presuppose the regularity of nature, you're also presupposing the causal principle. In addition to that, when you say the universe works, you're presupposing not only the principle of identity, that A equals A, but that there is identity over time for particulars. So when you say
none of that, I'm presupposing none of that.
Okay. So everything I just said went right over your head. You're not understanding this issue. This goes down to the very basics of the philosophy of science.
I understand.
You cannot listen to me. You cannot justify the things that I have listed by an appeal to empirical endeavors. Do you understand that?
Everything you've just listed have to be assumed maybe by science, but it's only because it observes it, right?
No, you're not.
Yes, that's a good point. And this is one of those things too, where Darth will talk about the regularity of nature and that being evidence for God. Well, how did you conclude there was regularity to nature? By observing it, by using the scientific method that I'm going to use the word that he always uses, by defecating all over it. He's defecating all over the scientific method, even though the scientific method is based on logical principles that are supposed to be reflective of the mind of his God.
Not understanding, again, you're repeating the same thing that you said 10 minutes ago. Science, listen to me, empirical endeavors, which are extensions of your sense perception, cannot establish the principle of identity and identity over time. It simply presupposes it, without which, empirical endeavors would not be meaningful. Okay, empirical endeavors must presuppose identity over time. They do not establish it.
No, I think that's actually the problem. This is one of those things where I feel like he's getting into that thing where you have to assume the uniformity of nature in order to do science, but that's not part of the false. It's amazing that he'll say stuff like this, and I'm pretty sure he's bleeding into this thing where science only works because they assume that they can predict, the past will be like the present, right? To an extent that's true, to a certain extent, right? But we know that because of inductive logic, not because of anything deductive, and we don't know it to a certainty. Right. And part of the reason why we develop more and more certainty that the past will kind of resemble the present resembles the past, and will the future will probably be pretty close, pretty similar to it, is because of scientific observations. He'll do stuff like this, but then he'll talk about things like I think I'm blanking on the term. It'll come back to me. But Jody, doesn't Bell's theorem support the uniformity of nature? I'm not sure about that because, like I said, I'm not the science guy. But my limited understanding to kind of like how philosophy of science and the scientific method is my something stinks here from Darth as usual.
Okay. Do you know what empiricism is?
Yeah, I do.
What is empiricism?
Look, I'm a methodological naturalist, Darth. And
what is it? Well, that's not an answer to my question. I will repeat the question. Do not listen to me. Let me just tell you a pet peeve that I have. Okay.
Yeah.
When somebody overtalks and interrupts me in order to be evasive or disruptive, I get pissed. Okay. If I'm making points that I'm not justifying and you want to interrupt me and say defend it, that's one thing. But you're interrupting me without answering the question.
Well,
now,
I think you made a bunch of
I asked you the okay, do not overtalk me. Again, I will tell you again. Don't overtalk me.
Now, keep in mind, like, he wasn't here. Like, I don't know if he started this room. This was probably Truthy's room, or maybe Enlighten's. Darth came in after the fact, and maybe when this picked up, it was, maybe Darth had been involved in this. But now he's just running this thing where, Darth is here, Darth's the boss. And Enlighten, of course, is going to let him, and so is Truthy. Even though Truthy, from what I've seen, I think Truthy has a better handle on philosophy than Darth. But I've seen Truthy say, and right, some pretty goofy things, so who knows?
I will repeat the question that you dodged. What is empiricism?
Okay, you done? Okay, so empiricism is our observation of the universe through our sense perception, and modern science is often augmented by.
No, that is wrong. Wrong.
Okay, explain to me how it's wrong.
Okay, empiricism is the position that the only way.
Yeah, Jeff Little Duck, the science guy, sounds too wordy. Yeah, and a little bit, like Jeff Little Duck. That sounds like like a kid's performer. Like, but yeah, I would not make a good science explainer. I mean, I think I might be a decent science communicator if I had studied more science, but not me. I was a arts and classics kind of guy. I studied stupid things like sociology, psychology, that kind of crap.
Or the best ways to know things. Okay, is through empirical endeavors. It is a permutation or an extension of verificationism. Do you know what verificationism is?
Yeah, I believe it's because you can't verify it, you don't know it, right?
No. Verificationism is a philosophical position that was prevalent in the first part of the 20th century. Okay, and I will explain it momentarily, but it got annihilated because upon philosophical analysis, it's self-refuting. Okay, so verificationism is a concept of the logical positivists, where they said the only meaningful statements, the only meaningful beliefs are ones that can be verified by sense perception.
That's what Marx said.
Verificationism. Even atheist philosophers today, almost universally, recognize that verificationism is self-refuting. Empiricism is a permutation of verificationism, that the only way or the best way to know something is through empirical endeavors. But you see, that statement cannot be known through empirical endeavors. Okay? So it too, because it is a permutation of verificationism, is self-referential and as a result, self-stultifying. It is self-refuting.
It's self-refuting because it's self-referential?
See, this doesn't make any sense. That would hold if empiricism. Look, there are people that try to use empiricism to try to answer big questions, like what things fundamentally are and why the world is what it is and why we exist, the nature, hope, meaning, and purpose, and those kinds of questions. Empiricism is probably not well suited to that. But what empiricism is well suited, this seems kind of weird too. Like, empiricism is verificationist, which is why it's good for going after things that are mundane, how to measure things, taking dimensions, that kind of stuff, for dealing with the world around you, measurements, predictions, recording raw data and that kind of stuff, and building models. That's all in empiricism. That stuff's helpful. What Darth seems to be trying to say here is like, well, if you're an empiricist, like Mark, I think, identified himself as being a methodological naturalist. I don't think that's philosophically, I don't think that's the same thing as saying that you're an empiricist, but I could be wrong about that. But Darth, I love it when Darth tries to do this, because like these guys like try to crap on empiricism quite a bit, and most of the time that they do it, they don't understand what empiricism has its uses, and in those uses, it's indispensable, right? It's led to an enormous amount of advancement for people, and if we've been able to hear Darth talk about it, it almost sounds like he's talking about the tenets of a cult, some kind of dark, a dark pact that seduces kids into communism, or whatever Darth's paranoid fantasies tend to trend toward. Yeah, I don't understand why, where well, I do understand it. I think the animosity towards empiricism is that empiricism ends up doing this thing where it tends to show, if you are a biblical literalist, empiricism does a really good job of starting to knock holes in biblical stories, right? If you're not a biblical literalist, if you're not a biblicist, then that's not a problem. Empiricism's not really that big of an issue. But if you get, when I hear apologists like Darth, professional or otherwise, start to just really screech about the effects of this is empiricism, and this is why it's fallen, and this is its fatal error, and all this kind of stuff. They're usually talking about empiricism if it were applied to some kind of search for greater truth or some kind of philosophical thing, and in that case they might have a point. But to throw the whole thing out doesn't make sense, unless you're a biblicist and you want to, as Darth's so fond of, defecate all over empiricism so that somebody can't turn around and use those rather mundane, tried and true methods of measurement to refute claims in the Bible, like the firmament's not real and the sun couldn't have stopped in the sky during a battle. Shit like that, If you need those things to be literally true, empiricism is going to constantly be a thorn in your side, and it's going to get in your way. And so maybe that's Darth's problem with it. Maybe that's what's giving him the heartburn.
No, not all self-referential statements are self-refuting. But when you say that the only way or the best way to know things are through, okay, first of all, before I continue, do you understand that empiricism, okay, as I'm explaining to you, is an extension or a permutation of verificationism?
I think I understand what you're saying. Yes.
Okay. Now, do you accept that that is historically true?
I accept your definition of empiricism. I don't know the history of it, but sure.
Okay. It is historically true. Okay. It's simply an extension saying the only things that are worthy of belief are those that we appeal to only by virtue of empirical endeavors, which are simply extensions of your sense perception. So empiricism is simply an extension or a permutation of verificationism. Verificationism is nearly universally recognized by public.
Yeah, no, that's not. I think he's going in the wrong direction with that. I'm pretty sure verificationism was sort of an exaggerated attempt to lean on empiricism as being like, the one, okay, we got this. It's one of those tendencies that people have. They find something that's really good and very versatile at a lot of different things. If we can apply it to many things, let's try applying it to absolutely everything. And then you get verificationism, where you try to develop a philosophy in which, like, look, here's how it's going to work. If it can't be empirically verified in some kind of falsifiable way, we're going to disregard it. Okay, that is kind of tough, because there's other pursuits that people get into with just their own subjective experience and things like that, where empiricism doesn't do a great job of trying to get to the how and why. Well, it can help get to the how, but it doesn't always get to the why of it. But I do still think Darth is being way too dismissive of empiricism. He wants to throw out the measurements because, I don't care that empiricism can tell me how big or how by what means. Empiricism is never going to tell me why, and I'll never trust it if it tries to. All right, fair enough. But that doesn't mean you should give up on empiricism when it can show you by what means and how big and how far and all that good stuff. I mean, sure, that might be boring, but it's work worth doing.
Philosophers, including atheist philosophers, as being self-refuting. And that means that by extension, empiricism, as I have defined it, is self-refuting too. Now, on the other hand, if we say that...
Now, that is a hell of a leap and basically fallacious, because verificationism comes from empiricism, or empiricism. What he's saying is empiricism is derived from verificationism, and because verificationism has these problems, it follows that empiricism must too. Nope. That's just stinking thinking, Darth. Come on.
Some beliefs are only worthy of belief by virtue of empirical endeavors, then no one's going to argue with you. But when you use it as a universal dictum, that the only beliefs that are worthy of believing are those that
he said dictum. Joseph says, Darth advocates absolute skepticism except about anything biblical. Hence why it's unreasonable to assume uniform nature, but perfectly acceptable to believe in Noah's Ark. Yeah. Or to posit things like, oh, well, never mind. I'm gonna end up chasing down a rabbit trail. You got me thinking about the flood.
That we establish through empirical endeavors, then it is a self-referential and self-refuting statement. Okay.
Hey, yeah, JS, you're not going to come back up, okay, dude? We've given you several.
No, he's not coming up. He's a numbskull. Yeah, go ahead.
When you talk about this idea of identity over time, and it's an interesting one. I can't think of one thing besides God and maybe abstract objects that are the same or immutable through one time period to the next. So what do you mean when you say identity over time? Maybe I have a different conception or a misconception.
Let me give you an example. Suppose there's an apple on the counter. And I say, look at that apple. And you look at the apple. And then I say, oh, look what time it is. And you look at the clock. And I say,
God.
Oh, you can eat that apple. And you look back at that apple a split second later. You believe that is the same apple that you looked at before you looked at the clock. Okay. You believe that both times that you looked at the apple, that's the same apple. Although the apple may have changed at a cellular or a molecular level ever so slightly that is imperceptible to you, but that is the same apple. Okay, that's what we call identity over time, or identity through time indexes: T1, T2, T3, T4, T5. Okay, now
Right.
It is a habit of human consciousness to presuppose identity over time. Now, presupposing identity over time does not mean that the thing in question that has identity over time itself does not subject to change. Okay, so certainly that when you first look at the apple and then you look at the clock and then you look back at the apple, if I said to you, do you think that apple changed in any way, in any sense, even down to at an atomic level? You would say, well, yeah, sure. I'm sure it changed at some microscopic level that is imperceptible to me, but it's still the same apple other than those changes that took place that I looked at before I looked at the clock. Identity over time is something that is a habit of the mind, right? And the reason why it's a habit of the mind is that is the way God makes us think.
Okay.
Now there are
What?
people who will reject that these fundamental habits of the mind are
Wait a minute.
God-given or because we're made in the image of God.
So, okay, I've heard him say this many times, that the reason we have to believe in God, or the reason we need to accept the existence of God, is because he provides for a solution to this problem of identity, or this issue of identity over time. And it sounds like to me that his solution is, we think that way because God makes us think that way. God made our minds to do that, and that solves it. No, it doesn't solve it. It's still a fucking conundrum. So this raises a shitload of questions. Like, okay, so God gave us the ability. So when I if I leave for many years and come back to find an old person in my hometown, the reason I have the capacity of realizing that much older person is my nephew or my niece, and not just a completely different person, is because God allows me to recognize identity over time. And that's just like, he's just asserting the solution. Because that's it. You need a supernatural foundation in order for that to work. Bonkers. That is the dumbest thing I think I will say that's one of the top 10 dumbass things from Ding Dong.
But this fundamental parameter, which you have to presuppose along with others in order to intelligibly think about your world, is not something that one can account for in a not God world. In the Christian worldview, which is the God world, everything that exists that is not God is instituted and secured by the mind, the purpose, and the plan of God. And that would include not only the principle of identity for any state of affairs, but identity over time. Now, when it comes to science, for some people who are poorly educated in philosophy, and by
like Darth, Hogtie, this is the kind of answer I would expect on a midterm exam written by a student who missed every class and is just guessing from the name identity over time. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I'm not great at trying to suss out that issue, other than to say, being posed, the thought problems like the ship of Theseus thing. But my God, Darth is the kind of guy that if he actually went into college, he'd fail classes because he would try to answer things in either, I mean, it could be anything, a political science class, a psychology class. He'd just insert some kind of goofy ass theological, fancy park Baptist school kind of crap in there. And the professor would be like, look, I can't accept this. This is not at all what we covered. And Darth would be like, well, you can't account for reality and you're not God world, and storm out and just have to like take the F. I don't deserve an F. They deserve Fs. Darth's a good boy and does what Jesus says. Those professors were mean and of Satan. Sorry. Get a little whippy. I think I'm starting to get tired. All right, let's get through
No
this.
means I'm an expert in philosophy. I make no claims. I know enough to be conversant. And they're
No, you don't. You have trouble accepting basic responses to questions you ask. You have trouble forming concise questions. You lack charity. So no, you are not good at conversing, and you are not educated well enough in any topic to be particularly good as even just a conversation partner. You are needlessly combative, hostile, self-involved, conceited, sanctimonious, and a dick.
people who are poorly educated in just a minimum of the philosophy of science think that all sorts of fundamental parameters.
What the fuck is the minimum of the philosophy of science? I would like, somebody needs to ask, what the hell is that? You tell me exactly what constitutes amongst philosophers. What is the minimum for the of the understanding necessary for the philosophy of science? Go for Darth.
Such as identity over time, the causal principle, the uniformity of nature, can all be verified, okay, or proven through empirical endeavors. This is completely false. Okay. All right.
Yes, they can be confirmed to a high degree of reliability. They can
No, you're still not understanding it, sir. Okay. When you say confirmed, right?
To a high degree of confidence.
You have to be, listen to me. We need to be very careful. Okay. Have you ever heard?
Yeah, this is going to be where Mark demonstrates that he is capable of being very careful with terms regarding philosophy of science, and Darth is going to just throw crap out and bounce around and drop trow and urinate and defecate and vomit all over everything, including Mark, and trying to show what a big brain he is and how much more he knows about science because Jeebus beamed it into his noggin, and Mark can go, suck a rubber ducky. Jail writes, how does he justify God securing identity over time while the universe speeds towards thermal equilibrium and the dissolution of all matter? I haven't heard him use it in a while, but Darth used to like to get into heat death was a common phrase I would hear from Darth Dawkins. He'd mention it all the time. Well, you guys just believe in the heat death, or it was a way that I think he thought that concept he could use to scare more science-minded skeptics into thinking that God must be necessary because the universe is just inevitably speeding towards that. So he acknowledges like the heat death of the universe, but he's still saying God secures identity over time. Darth can have it all ways. He can contradict himself. Because praise the Lord.
Of the phrase the problem of induction.
Yes.
Okay. Well, how do you establish certain things? Are you doing it through induction?
I think we all do.
Okay. Well then, but you see, induction can't get you to a universal claim. Are you aware of that? It's called the problem of induction.
Yeah, I know. Induction can get you only to a very.
Can
you gonna let me finish? Or you're gonna stop talking?
No, I'm stopping you because.
If the universe ends in a state in which no matter exists and there is no identity over time. Yeah, I know. I get it. And well, maybe he doesn't understand that that's what the end of the universe entails, but he would talk about that with people. Like, we know that the universe is spiraling out and the eventual heat death of the universe, blah, 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 in which, all this stuff just fades into existence. Don't you think that there'd have to be a God there? Or like, what would be the meaning to any of that? Which, well, I don't know, right? So he'll slip into that. But clearly he can't. I mean, the idea that he can't, piece these two things together and be like, oh, okay, well, there is no identity over time. And you know what helps us get to that conclusion? Empiricism. Poor Darth. Poor Darth. He should just stick to watching reruns of Cops.
Because you're not understanding, okay? And I think you need to be a little bit more modest in recognizing that you're not understanding certain concepts, okay? Now, hold on one second. All right, so
Thanks.
listen to me. Okay, so for example, when it comes to identity over time, right? Well, let me ask you this way: do you think that you can demonstrate the regularity of nature through induction?
I think induction, yes, you can disturb. You can.
No,
you
you
can
can't.
establish
No, that's a
You
fallacy.
can.
Yes, you can. I mean, you're doing it provisionally, but you can still do it. I love this. Like, can you demonstrate the regularity of nature or the regularity of any kind of natural function with induction? Yes.
Establish a confidence level of the
No,
regularity.
you're not understanding. You're not understanding. Competence has nothing to do with it. What we're talking about is a rational justification. There are people. There are men who go on dates who think they're really macho and they're not. Confidence has nothing to do with this. The question is there rational grounds? See, this is another amateur.
Are you talking about it?
Okay,
about
listen.
justified belief?
Listen to me carefully. Listen to me carefully. You have conflated a rational basis for a proposition. You have conflated it with confidence that something is true. You understand?
I don't think Mark did that at all. Because we're not talking about like pure rationality here. We're not talking about something that you're working out as a deductive syllogism at this point. With empiricism, you are talking about using inductive logic because you're talking about making repeatable, testable observations over time. So yeah, that regularity, we don't assume the regularity and then get it because then we make the right and then we go out looking for that regularity. We make the observations, and as we start noticing those patterns, you record those patterns and then you test to see if they fail. That's the whole point of falsifiability, to see if you can get it to happen. Well, actually, even better, it's one thing to say that you want to test it to see if it happens again. Karl Popper would be test to see if it won't happen. Right? That's what you need to do. You need to falsify it. Right, that's a stronger stance to take. But yes, that would demonstrate regularity. Does it demonstrate it 100% certainly to 100% certitude? Who knows? My guess would be no. Right? I mean, epistemologically, we have limits, so we can't know. But that's not what he asked. He asked if it could demonstrate regularity, and it does.
The conflation that you've made.
You're claiming that my confidence has no rational justification.
You're not getting this, and I'm really beginning to pick up vibes here that you're blinded by your lack of humility and lack of learning. You've demonstrated to me that you don't know some of these basics. So I'm going to ask you again: can you rationally ground the uniformity of nature by an inductive process?
Can I rationally ground it? No, I can establish.
No, that's a different Jesus Christ. That's a completely different burden. Good Lord, Darth.
That it looks like it exists, and it exists as far as we can tell.
That's not. I didn't ask you that. I didn't ask.
But I think.
I didn't
Hold on.
ask you.
Can I elaborate?
Listen,
on how
I didn't ask you. I didn't ask you to surmise how something seems to be. Can you?
Darth doesn't know what he's talking about.
Rationally ground the uniformity of nature by induction. Yes or no?
I can ground it from a hypothesis, which is supported by induction.
No, you're not understanding. Okay, listen, you're not getting this. So either you're just uninformed, and or you're suffering from a lack of humility. Okay.
Project much there, Darth? Whew. Notice that DD once again misused the term rational justification to be perfectly identical with the notion of 100% rock solid sound deductive argument. Yeah, and I don't know what happened in the last decade or so where Christians decided to take inductive logic and flush it down the toilet. Like if deductive arguments are white magic that you can use to lure the skeptics back to Christ, inductive logic is the black magic that sucks people right out of Christianity and straight into the whirling fiery maelstrom of hell. Right? Like, I really don't get it. I don't get why they do this. Fuck.
Okay, listen very carefully.
And this is actually, I should be more frustrated about this because this is the most irritating thing. It's one thing for Darth to come onto these kinds of conversations and then burp up a bunch of stuff about theology and get a lot of it wrong, or get you know, say he's on a particular topic where he's getting like the Baptist position like 98% right. Okay, cool, right? It's theology, you know. You take it or leave it. I mean, the vast majority even believers wipe their ass with theology at a certain degree. Like they don't care. But when he comes on here and tries to say like, aha, you know, my understanding of theology informs my understanding of philosophy, which understands informs my understanding about every other goddamn thing, including like how to bake a cake and how to figure out problems in philosophy of science. So I'm going to tell you, Mark, how science works and why you're wrong. Like, that is the essence of a lack of humility right there. Just because you've got some theological understanding under your belt does not qualify you to weigh in on science shit you don't know shit about. Especially when you think that, oh, well, I have this understanding of these weaknesses of empiricism. Empiricism equals verificationism, and therefore empiricism is good for nothing. Right? Now, if you presented Darth with that, I'm sure he'd be like, no, I didn't say empiricism wasn't good for anything, and he better fucking not, because empiricism gave him all of his groovy Apple products that he loves so much and he jerks off about. So, yeah, empiricism is good for that, for Darth to be a good little consumer and a basic bitch and run out and, you know, grab a new iPhone or a new Apple Watch or some horse shit, right? I'm not bagging on Apple products, although I am kind of bagging on the marketing for them. Just people that, I mean, I like some Apple products, but people that freak out about them are weird. Anyway, but this just complete superficiality. Like, oh, I've got I know that he's gotten this from different apologists before that talk about this stuff, and the reason he's gotten this stuff is because he has snorted an enormous amount of young Earth creationist horseshit. I mean, he complains about people defecating on him. It's because he is up to his neck in horse shit of the young Earth creationist variety. I mean, can't escape the smell of it, permanently seared into his brain kind of thing. And that's what he's channeling here. This is classic, you know, young Earth creationist crap, right? Well, your empiricism is just verificationism. You can't really trust anything that you do. Like, Jesus Christ. If you listen to one of these guys talk about it, these guys will talk you out of believing in gravity for the sake of converting to Jesus. It's fucking insane.
You cannot ground universals via induction. Okay, it's called the white swan fallacy. Okay, if every swan that I see is white and I travel the world,
I swear to God, every time he talks about induction, he invokes this thing, and that is not induction. The black swan, this black swan fallacy or white swan fallacy, or however you decide to refer to it, is an issue with induction, but it is not. It is not a killer. He acts like, well, we've got this problem that proves that there's no induction. Cool. If we've got a problem that shows that there's an inconsistency here with an induction, a real problem that we can't quite get our noodle around, then it blows up induction, and we should get rid of it. Great. We should also get rid of identity over time as a concept. He wants to say, well, identity over time is it's supported by the fact that God makes our brains think that way. Yeah. Okay. Well, the ship of Theseus problem would beg to differ, right? That raises a real conundrum about this, a real problem about that. And per Darth's example, if we can use a black swan fallacy to completely throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to induction, well, then anything that he has to say about identity and identity over time, I'm just going to mention the ship of Theseus and say, there, it's a problem and icky. I don't like it. Get rid of all of it. There, problem solved, right? Sounds fair. Idiot. This man is this guy is the typhoid Mary of ignorance. Like it's just fallen off him in clumps, and it's airborne somehow. Like it's contagious. Mark, was not my best night. I was tired and not prepared. Oh, this is you. Oh, hey, Mark. I didn't realize that was you were the same Mark as this. Well, good going. I thought you were doing okay, but he's really over talking the shit out of you. And when you get into this kind of stuff, if you get into kind of philosophy of science, that Darth loves to rip and run this stuff because it gives him an opportunity to dust off the old young Earth creationist bullshit, and he has got a ton of that stuff. So if you're not prepared for all of that nonsense, yeah, he'll just tire you out. He'll run out the clock, so to speak. And thank you very much for the super chat. But no, I thought you were doing okay here. given the fractions of seconds he's allowing you to talk. Rick Manels, thanks for the super chat. For being so anti-pot, Didi frequently reminds me of the powwow scene in Revenge of the Nerds Part 2. I find myself saying, whoa, that's heavy ogre. I haven't seen that movie in years, but I'll take your word on that. That's a good reference. Good cut.
And I never see a black swan. And I assert, therefore, all swans are white. Okay? Is the universal dictum that all swans are white, is it rationally justified by my induction?
I've already admitted there's a fallible.
Okay, so you cannot rationally justify.
There he goes. That's exactly what was pointed out before. Rational justification has to be a deductive argument, even though the AJ just pointed out, and I highlighted, the swan fallacy is only fallacious if used deductively, right? This is just Darth saying that the only thing rational is a deductive argument, right? Which is goofy, because then he can turn around and quote Kai Nielsen and say, all the arguments for God may fail, but that does not mean that God does not exist. What arguments is he talking about? The only arguments Darth cares about are deductive ones. What the hell does that mean? What Kai Nielsen meant was that you can have lots of valid arguments, but that doesn't necessarily mean any of them are sound, which means that, true, which means they could all fail. But it could still be the case that even though all these valid arguments aren't working, a God could still exist, right? The point of that statement that Darth likes to abuse is to point out the limitations of deductive arguments. And here Darth is actually saying, well, no, Darth, it is clear to me, like I think it was Hogtie that mentioned it before, that rational justification or rational explanation, by that, Darth just means deductive arguments, and that's all he's willing to accept. Induction, he has gotten rid of that.
The invocation of the uniformity of nature via induction, nor can you do it by deduction, because then you would have to be omniscient. Okay?
Right, I think
so. The uniformity of nature is a concept about fundamental parameters without which you couldn't talk about seeing the grass blow in the wind. You must presuppose any type of empirical statement that you make.
Oh, Lord.
You must presuppose the regularity of nature. Okay.
Right. So I assume you're familiar with like Munchausen's trilemma, right?
Yes, I am.
Right. So that's where I start, and there are some presuppositions. There's on the foundational list. There's some foundational presuppositions I make. Right.
What is your most fundamental singular parameter that institutes and secures any instances of what is, can be, or cannot be?
And that is a great example right there of Mark. Mark brings up the Munchausen trilemma, and what does Darth do? Darth basically Darth is implying that the only horn that matters is the foundational one, even though that's not the point of the Munchausen trilemma. Right? The point is, you've got these three different things, infinitism, coherentism, foundationalism, right? And the one thing that, there are people that kind of like will identify as being like more inclined to think that foundationalism is true, or infinitism is true, or coherentism is true. Less so, the fewer people are on team infinitism, right? That's like the Hufflepuff of these. But the point, the other observation to make there is that those categories are ways we approach truth, or ways we try to justify things. And that's why it's a trilemma. We will appeal to a foundation if for some truths. We will appeal to an infinite series for other truths. We will appeal to coherentism for other truths. And oftentimes there's contradictions implied there. That's why it's a trilemma. So Darth now is like, okay, well, I need to know what your foundation, the ultimate foundation is for that. That's an appeal to a kind of foundationalism that someone would take in the sense that they're calling themselves like a foundationalist with a capital F. I don't think I'm mischaracterizing that. I might be. If I am, somebody yell at me, email me, tell me to stop, help me start up a Kickstarter so that I can fund a philosophy 101 class for myself. But anyway, that's what I take it to be. And Darth is already, but now it's too late. Mark brought that up. Darth is using that as a way to navigate Mark right onto the treadmill.
Reality or existence or the universe, whatever you want to put.
Okay, now, do you realize? And
there it is.
I'm controlling myself by not laughing,
because
that is the go-to. Listen, that is the go-to response that people go to when they don't know what they're talking about. Okay,
but continue.
Can I ask a question here, Darth?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so Mark, if you're familiar with the Munchausen trilemma, right? That the thesis of that is that every single epistemic starting point is fallacious.
I was talking
so do you agree?
It's not necessarily that it's fallacious, it's that it has problems. It has grounding issues. It doesn't mean that it's fallacious. They usually, like, the foundationalism usually ends up, you end up having to assert something that you can't ultimately prove, right? Infinitism, you have an infinite regress. Coherentism has a problem in that if everything coheres to everything, then nothing really coheres to anything, kind of. That's a horrible way of summing it up, but those are kinds of the problems. I don't know if a fallacious is the best way to describe that. I mean, maybe it is to kind of sum things up, but Josephus Rivero says, revelation is not a deductive process. If something requires deduction to be rational, then it seems like Darth's belief in God would be irrational. That's an interesting point. I don't know. I think Darth would say that revelation is well, he would say that it. Yeah, I don't know. Would he fall into that? That'd be fun. It'd be fun to see if he'd say that revelation is a deductive thing, because if he did that, he'd have to back it up, and I don't think he's got the stuff for that. David Street, thank you for the super chat. Darth is a misunderstood genius. In 2,000 years, people will look back at him as a mentally disabled Aristotle. That's very true. Very possible. If any of this stuff is still around. Benghazi, I'm a Hufflepuff. Yeah, you probably shouldn't admit to that out loud. Sorry. No, it's all right. Isn't the guy from the Fantastic Beasts ones, the main dude, isn't he a Hufflepuff? The one who's like the zoologist or whatever?
Okay. But it's an aside because I really am interested in this issue. I think about it a lot. So the thesis of that trilemma is that every single epistemic starting point is fallacious. So do you agree that the bootstrapping point of which you're basing all of your knowledge on is fallacious?
Sure.
Yeah, and I don't. If Mark is going to agree to that, that's fine. Is Darth going to admit to that? Because Darth is squarely saying, nope. It's foundationalism or bust. I mean, Darth should be yelling at Truthy right now.
And everyone in this room is starting on the fallacious point.
Well, that
okay, good. Then what you have just committed is the tu quoque fallacy. Do you realize that?
Oh, we're all the same.
Jesus fucking Christ, Darth. No, he isn't. Truthy just opened it up to that. Truthy just said that all three positions are fallacious. Mark is just making that same observation again. And Darth is like, quickly, oh, you're just saying tu quoque. That's not a tu quoque fallacy, for God's sake. Damn. Darth apparently is not familiar with the fallacy, accusing people of fallacies just to do it, which actually isn't the fallacy, but it's the Darth Dawkins fallacy. I'm going to say that you did something fallacious because I don't like you.
Vote. Who has a better
No.
Hey, Mark, let me ask you a question. I understand I certainly do not sound like I'm an expert, but I think I've made it clear that I've studied this issue quite a bit. You just committed the tu quoque fallacy.
No,
that
he fucking didn't.
You too. You suffer from the same problem. Okay? It's pointless to say you too. Now, the point...
No. This would be Darth engaging in something of a little bit of a fallacious thinking, because he's not actually applying what Truthy said about the three horns of the Munchausen trilemma to himself. He asked Mark the question about that foundationalism, and Mark gave an answer, and several people laughed at him, right? And Truthy tries to bring up this point, but kind of similar to mine, that all three of these things basically, he said they were fallacious. I don't think that they're necessarily fallacious. I think they lack a sufficient grounding at some point in their justification, right? And Mark essentially agreed with that. He even agreed with Truthy's wording of fallacious. And Darth is immediately jumping on, aha, Mark, and Mark's observing, well, we're all doing that. That's a tu quoque fallacy, Mark. No, it fucking isn't, Darth. It fucking is not.
The point is this, right? Unless you are attempting to reason about the world, that at its root, the reason why you can know and believe anything is because there is a creator God who has made us to know things through his revelatory actions.
Which you can't demonstrate, you can only assert, which is the reason why that bit of foundationalism lacks. That's part of the point that Truthy was bringing up. Jefferson committing the fallacy there? Yeah, guilty.
Or if you reject that, then we're going to have to ask you how you come to know what fundamental parameters exist. Now, when I asked you a minute ago, what is it that singularly institutes every instance of what is, can be, and cannot be?
Loaded question. How do you know it's one thing?
Reality is not a term that singularly refers to a concrete one. It's a singular term that refers to an abstract one, which is a grouping of concrete particulars. It's a plurality. Reality is the set of all real things. Do you agree with that statement?
No, I don't actually. I'll tell you that
Hold on a second. Now I'm really getting to the root of the problem here of how ill-informed you are.
Like me to finish?
So reality. Listen to me. No, I'm going to cut you off right now because you just demonstrated to me your complete ignorance. Now I'm not saying that to throw you under the bus. I'm saying it to educate you.
You know what priority monad is?
Listen to me.
What the fuck is edifying about having somebody do this to you? There's nothing like I'm doing this to educate you. There's nothing intellectually or morally edifying about any of this crap from Darth. I didn't do that to throw you under the bus. If you didn't, it was kind of funny that you mentioned that right off the bat. I didn't say that you did. It's kind of funny that you already volunteered. Like, I'm not trying to be a dick here, but I think you're a piece of shit, right? Like, Darth is so completely full of himself that I don't even know if he's capable of understanding the total lack of self-awareness his word choice has here. But almost everything that he's accused Mark of in the last 3 minutes has been total bullshit.
Mark, listen to me very carefully. Reality will refer to one of two things in the English language. It will either appeal to that there is a particular state of affairs that are actual, such as the reality that the Eiffel Tower stands in Paris. And if it's not referring to a particular state of affairs, okay, or a grouping of affairs, then what it's referring to is the set of all real things. Now, when I ask you, what is it that singularly, I'm talking about a concrete one, not an abstract one of concrete particulars. When I say, what is it that is one concrete thing that institutes all instances of what is, can be, and cannot be, and you say reality, what I want you to explain to me definitionally, what does the word reality mean?
It is the container of all real things, right?
So sir, oh wow.
Can you let me get?
Oh my God, a container. What is this?
All right, hold on.
Is this container abstract or concrete?
You might call it concrete universal.
No. Okay. What? Okay. If it's concrete, what is it?
What is it? It exists. What do you mean? What is it? It's all. It's,
no.
It's a set of all
listen
real
to
things.
me carefully. So listen to me. No, you're not. Oh, wow, dude. Okay. Either you're now going into argumentative mode, or you don't understand the mistakes that you're making. Okay. Now, I'm beginning to suspect that somebody is feeding you stuff through text messages because of what you just said. Maybe I'm
no.
Now,
I'm here by myself.
Good. Okay. Now, okay. Good. So so for you, God is not the concrete universal that imposes.
I mean, how fucking toxic do you have to be as a human being where you get into enough of these conversations where you suspect that somebody is that you you have such a target on you that people are going to feed comments to another person in order to get to get over on you. Like, this is Darth's reality, where he goes onto social media and has to be constantly concerned that someone's trying to get over on him, or get an advantage on him. Like, just fucking unreal.
Institutes and secures each instance of particularity. Okay, so what is this one concrete thing?
Okay, the view is labeled priority monast, right, or monast priority. I can't remember which order they go in, but essentially it's saying that the universe is one thing that contains many concrete.
You're not okay. You're making another mistake there. Okay.
Yeah.
The universe is not one concrete thing. It is a singular term, which is an abstraction that collectivifies a plurality of things. Okay, it's not a concrete one.
Oh, we may think
the term universe. Listen to me carefully. Listen carefully.
So, just to throw off Darth's take here, that priority monism is roughly the view that the universe or cosmos, i.e., the mirologically maximal element, is the only fundamental concrete object. That is to say that the universe does not depend on any other concrete object. In fact, any other concrete object ultimately depends on it. I think I actually, without knowing what this concept was, attempted to define this into a conversation with Darth Dawkins years ago, and it did not work.
The term reality, the term cosmos, the term universe are singular terms, but they are abstract terms which are referencing a plurality of concrete particulars. Those terms are not concrete singulars.
Exactly, Hawkeye. Exactly.
The universe, reality are not in actuality philosophically concrete ones. They are a plurality of concrete particulars.
Darth is presenting, I don't know, I don't remember the name of this particular view, but he's presenting a view on this, and he's presenting it to Mark and everyone else here as if it's an established fact, and I don't think that it is. Because trying to just automatically say, well, this is what reality is, backward and forward, up and down, no. Like, who... I mean, who the hell does Darth... Well, he thinks he's Darth Dawkins. I mean, you have got to be completely out of it to think that you can just make these kinds of statements about something as theoretical, right? As you know, within theoretical concepts of reality, you know, writ large, and just state this as if you're like, no, this is how you make a grilled cheese. Right. This is the proper way of making a grilled cheese. You know, you don't, you know, if you picked Velveeta, you failed. You know, that like this is bizarre to me. He knows this definitively, and all y'all just need to shut up and recognize.
And the unification by a single term is what we call an abstraction. The unity takes place in the mind. Okay, so when you say the universe, okay, you're not dealing with a concrete particular there. You're dealing with an abstract particular, which represents the collective plurality of concrete particulars. Did you understand the critique I just gave you?
I think I did, yeah.
Okay,
Would you like me to respond?
so you're not giving me a concrete particular. You're giving me an abstract one, which you referred to as the universe, which is the set of all concrete particulars. So it doesn't address the question
No,
that I've
I
asked.
said I understood your critique. It doesn't mean I agree with it. Would you like me to respond?
Okay. What do you have a concrete particular, or do you have an abstract particular?
Yeah, this is when I start checking out of the conversation, when he starts doing this shit, because I've had this conversation with before, and then after he kicked me, because of course no one gives him the appropriate answer, or you do give him the appropriate answer, but then he accuses you of contradicting yourself from like 10 minutes before. He kicks you, and then you get to listen to him run his mouth and then contradict himself on a bunch of this shit like this. Hogtie writes, DD is wrong about universe equals cosmos equals reality. Those words refer to 3 different concepts. E.g., it's logically possible that reality contains 7 universes. Exactly. This, I mean, that's a perfect window into the kinds of just, you know, sloppy conflations that Darth does when he's trying to talk about this stuff. He sounds confident when he tries to truck all this kind of stuff out, and he's just telling Mark like, "Oh, I'm going to tell you how reality works." Like, no, you're not, Bubba. That's not how. You don't have a monopoly on that. I don't care what you think God revealed to you. There's a lot of room for discussion there, and notice what's happening here. Mark is trying to bring up, even though he admitted that he got the term wrong, but he was on it, right? He's trying to explain it. Darth just cuts him off, and no, this is how it's going to work. I'm going to explain it to you. These are not concepts that Darth has a firm grasp on, because as Hogtie just demonstrated, universe does not equal cosmos, does not equal reality. And the fact that Darth is using them so flippantly and so interchangeably means he's not, and I don't think he really cares, because you can take universe plus cosmos plus reality, and you know what they equal in Darth's mind? God's creation. That's what ultimately justifies him being sloppy about this stuff. Anybody else that's trying to sort this stuff out, especially those goddamned empiricists that Darth hates so much, well, you know, they have to pay attention and be careful. Darth doesn't have to. Ultimately, what we're talking about is God and God's stuff. That's it. Keeps it simple. I think I'm going to wrap this one up here in a couple of minutes here, because I want to make one final point.
Reality is a concrete particular, as many
No,
philosophers
wrong.
hold.
No, sir.
You
no,
can
sir.
say it doesn't.
Listen, you're not understanding. Okay. The universe, okay, is a term which collectivizes everything within our uniform experience: the sun, the moon, the stars, asteroids, things like that.
If no one objects,
and it can even include, you can even throw into,
because he's just going to keep doing this, and he's just going to keep making everybody more stupid that listens to him. I'm going to push this forward, because I see here in about, what is this? In about 5 minutes, I think he kicks him. Yep, right there. Let's see him get worked up. About the 31-minute mark. Let's see what happens. Oh, and Veckel comes in. Great. The room just keeps getting, I mean, it's the blue ribbon science winners here.
Not be referring to a plurality of things. Okay. So what is the concrete particular? I want you to be specific.
Holy shit, he's been talking about this that entire time. I pushed it forward. He's still asking about the concrete particular.
And not give me terms that are abstractions.
It's reality. It's the existence.
A concrete particular. What do you think concrete particular represents, if not an abstraction? Language is an abstraction, Darth. What the fuck?
Since that
You're committing the reification fallacy. Reality is simply a term that refers to the set of all real things.
Okay. You refer to the natural world, right?
Listen, Mark, I'm going to ask you, better think carefully about this answer, okay? Because if you give me a deceptive answer, I'm going to kick you.
Okay? I'm shaking, Darth.
Now, okay, goodbye. Okay, goodbye. All right, okay. Yeah.
Oh man, that's what we're.
So either this guy is an ignoramus, and he's
I like that Enlighten is still doing the thing now that he's back, because we get to he's still like unmuting to make that weird like sound to simp for Darth.
Very prideful and arrogant, or he's just pulling our chain and he's trolling.
Yeah, Mark sounded totally prideful and arrogant the whole 20 seconds he got to talk cumulatively. Darth, awesome. Way to show everybody what a complete and total raging Adolf Hitler equivalent lunatic Mark was. Fucking hell.
Okay. And I suspect that it is the latter. Okay.
Speaking of which, I think I've seen him before. He was on Atheist helpline in Discord a lot, and he used to troll. I think I know who he is.
Okay. Yeah. Well.
Of course he was trolling, right? Because he disagreed with you, so he must be trolling. Hogtie Champ, please note when DD is told something that he doesn't understand and can't address, he will say, you're not understanding. Yeah. At no point does he ever acknowledge that he doesn't understand something. Like he'll understand that he's not acquainted with something, like if it's like a trivia reference or some pop culture bullshit. But yeah, he of course understands the like the back of his hand, the nature of reality and the universe as God told him, over coffee one time.
It's clear to me that he's not now trolling. It's not just arrogance and pride, right?
My favorite part was when Darth asked him what's empiricism. He said, "I'm a methodological naturalist."
Yeah, that was a great answer, wasn't it?
Classic answer.
Well, actually, he was trying to launch into an explanation, but then Darth cut him off, and then tried to make it that was his answer, and James just committed the same thing too. I'm starting to see that James here, this James and Enlighten, have the same listening skills equivalent to the reading comprehension levels of a lot of these apologists, where they just decide that, the way that Darth tried to the way he implied something went, or the way he misconstrued something, is the way it actually happened, and it's totally okay to draw the wrong conclusion as long as Daddy D did. Way to simp, James. You too, Enlighten.
Okay, so
good stuff.
The point is, when I said to him, what is the concrete particular that you call the universe? And then he says it's reality. He's referring to a plurality of concrete particulars.
Oh, for fuck's sake! I mean, how long? Jesus Christ! How many times can he repeat this to the same people he was talking to? What the hell? So yeah, I'm going to wrap it up there. I don't think anybody else comes in or does anything at that point. I wonder what. Well, eventually, yeah. Well, actually, not that James. It looks like I think I know that James. He appears. But yeah, so we'll wrap that up. With that in mind, the one thing I'm going to bring up here is and I wanted to share this before I get too tired, and so wrapping things up, I'm going to share out this particular entry for those. I mean, this gets talked about quite a bit. It is the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. This particular entry is called God and Other Ultimates. I recommend this to anybody that's interested in reading it. It's a weird read. I think this one is from Janine Diller. Let me scroll down. And she is a philosopher of religion. I can't remember what school she's at, but I think she's the one that wrote this. Yep, Janine Diller, right down here. University of Toledo. And I believe she specializes in the philosophy of religion. So she gets into this thing about defining God and other ultimates. And as she's doing this very quickly, she gets into something that I think a lot of people that watch my stuff, and you guys see Jay Robin and stuff talking about this kind of stuff, especially like an ultimate God and all this crap. there is a man, a relatively famous philosopher of religion named Schellenberg, who gets into, he kind of laid this out, and she lays this out here. Schellenberg's account of what it takes to be ultimate is already somewhat vague. He recommends no further precisification of his three terms. Now, and that's actually up in this paragraph up here. So there was a cross-cultural comparative religious ideas project that was run by Robert Neville and Wesley Wildman, and she talks about how they were trying to come up with this sort of universal way of understanding what a lot of these different comparative cultures and religions mean when they refer to some kind of ultimate being, right? And one of the things they rely on is Schellenberg's kind of take on it. And so to paraphrase, Schellenberg takes being ultimate to mean being that which is, 1, the most real, 2, the most valuable, and 3, the source of deepest fulfillment, right? So what you end up getting there, more carefully, and in Schellenberg's words, being ultimate requires being ultimate in 3 ways. Metaphysically ultimate, meaning the most fundamental fact about the nature of things, which is usually what we end up hearing about from J. Robin and Darth Dawkins. But then there's 2 more. Axiologically ultimate, which that which has unsurpassably great value, meaning greatness along all its categories of being, which is actually something that these guys usually quibble about, because that's where you can actually get into the omni properties, and that becomes really touchy for them. If you watch Clubhouse debates, you can see these guys having conversations about problem of evil with some of these guys, and they're a nightmare. 3, soteriologically ultimate, the source of an ultimate good, salvific in some way, meaning being the source of salvation, liberation, of the kind of practitioners of the world's religions and philosophers ardently seek. Nirvana, communing with God, moksha, sent to the one, all that kind of stuff, right? So there's 3 categories, right? And for the most part, a lot of philosophers of religion kind of lean into Schellenberg's kind of 3-part take on an ultimate being. It needs to be metaphysically ultimate, axiologically ultimate, and soteriologically ultimate. But where things get interesting is in this particular thing, it gets into definition of the model, motivations, it gets into challenges. And this is the interesting one, and this is the one I'd be interested in talking about with somebody who's much better educated in philosophy than me. She tries to sum it up here. She says, to offer just one example of a second challenge, Stephen Mateson argues against the concept of ultimacy on multiple fronts, including that nothing can be metaphysically ultimate in Schellenberg's sense because it would need to be simultaneously a se and concrete. A se meaning it exists independent of anything else. So that it can be metaphysically independent and explain concrete things, respectively. But no concrete thing can explain itself because, to shorten the argument considerably, even the necessity of such a thing is not identical to itself, so it's not explaining itself. If Mateson is right, nothing can be metaphysically ultimate in Schellenberg's sense, and thus not metaphysically, axiologically, and soteriologically ultimate at once. So the link to this particular entry is in there if you want to take a look at it. I've read this. I keep reading this. I've been thinking about this argument. If you want to read Mateson's argument in its entirety, I'll stop this and share that out. I kind of feel like one way, sharing out different. Although I'm not showing you how to download books illegally, so that's something I won't do. Sorry. Let me see if I can just. I'll just share out the window. I don't need the sound. Here we go. There's that entry. I can drop that. This is it. Acadia University Philosophy, Stephen Mateson. And it's got his stuff here. If you can actually see that, my screen is kind of small. The one that you want to look for, these are all PDFs, different things. The one from 2017, it is Against Ultimacy, right there. And this was out of Renewing Philosophy, Religion, Exploratory Essays, Paul Draper, Schellenberg, Oxford University Press. It's not a big one. It is right here. This is the PDF of it. I think it's 16 pages long, 15, 16 pages long. It is kind of a mind job. At least initially it starts out pretty good. Once he gets into some of the other ultimate properties in there, it gets a little less intuitive. But this is an interesting paper and relatively new. This is just from 2017. And this is something that I told J. Robin about. J. Robin wanted to know, hey, God does not exist because, and I told him to read this, and he blew it off and said he didn't need a homework assignment. I'm kind of thinking J. Robin was a shitty student. So anyway, yeah, if anybody's interested in that, the links are in the description. If you happen to be interested in this, if anybody's watching this and is already like a Danny or anybody, because I know Danny's I think he's working on his PhD in philosophy, but if anybody's interested in talking about this in a little bit more depth, I would be interested in having a longer discussion about this. Doesn't have to be online, doesn't have to be a live video, but I would be interested in discussing this particular argument, because I think there's aspects to this particular thing, especially in the way Machen addresses this notion of ultimacy, that are potentially devastating if you bring them up, because I think that they could, if they're communicated, I think, in plainer language, really cause a lot of these sort of cocksure apologists that are just like, I've got an ultimate on my side and you can't stop me, right? Now it's your move, atheist. I've already won. You just haven't realized it yet. This is like, no, you haven't. You're actually in a really bad situation here. And what really makes this good, what I really appreciate about it, is Schellenberg, as a philosopher of science, or excuse me, the total philosopher of religion, his definition, his concept of an ultimate being is much more robust than what J. Robin or Darth Dawkins are giving people. For the most part, all they're doing is they're leaning on the metaphysically ultimate thing. It has to be the most real thing upon which all other things depend. And then any other properties of it, they just glean off the Bible. So that's where and then their inconsistencies kick in based on their knowledge of the Bible and their understanding of theological concepts about like omni properties and stuff. They don't run with Schellenberg's more overarching like axiological ultimacy, which would imply those greatness features and might actually carry into them some contradictions. And I think Stephen Machen's argument gets into that. So I guess I'm giving everybody else homework. If you're interested in that kind of thing, you want to take a look at it, this is a pretty good resource. So, but yeah, if anybody's interested in talking about it later on, give it a read, give it a think, yell at me, blame me for it, thank me for it, whatever you want to do. But yeah, hopefully it inspires some new lines of thinking, some new lines of arguments, some new defenses, some new questions to ask theists when they're coming at us in conversations on like, well, God is ultimate and I got him on my side, so your move, weakling. It's just you on your onesomes, without any kind of ultimacy with you. I think this pokes a hole in a lot of that. So anyway, it's late. I need to go to bed. This has probably gone on for too long. I apologize for how long these things are. I promise I will eventually start doing shorter videos, smaller, more frequent, smaller, more digestible components of this rather than trying to catch up and doing a big one. Maybe. But yeah, until then, thank you everybody for showing up, like, subscribe, and all that kind of stuff. Love you all. As always, chat was always great. Thank you for the super chats. Be great to each other, and I will catch you all later. See you next time, and I will see you and hopefully respond to you if you leave comments later. So good night, everybody. Take care.